Hi everyone, and we are very happy to be here today. And so now, as Valerie said, we will present you the first part of our work on SignWriting. And we will show you the process by which deaf users are appropriating and adapting SignWriting. However, before that, I shall briefly introduce our group and the SWORD project. I'm at the third slide, third slide, but you don't need to see it, so it's okay. And so we are Fabrizio. Fabrizio is a PhD student in computer sciences, and he is doing his dissertation in the digitalization of SignWriting. Maria is Fabrizio's main professor, and she's a computer science specialist. And she coordinated our SWORD project. And Claudia is me, and I am a linguist, and I'm an expert of writing system for sign languages, and I've done my PhD on SignWriting. So for more details, I know that there is a CV on the website, so I don't give you more details than this. But we are not the first one working with SignWriting in Italy. So I need to tell you how SignWriting reached Italy. In the 90s, there was really a great sign language researcher, linguist, that was Elena Pizzuto, and she died like 4 years ago, and it was really a pity for us because she really trusts in SignWriting. And she began in the 90s, she began a reflection about the fact that if you really want to discover how sign language works, you need to represent it. Because no linguist has done a research on a language without representing it. So she started investigating on notation system for sign languages, and she tried a lot of systems, but no, she didn't find one that was a suitable one. In 2000, she finally discovered SignWriting, and she called Valerie at the phone. And this was really the first contact between Italy and SignWriting. After this first contact between two hearing person, there was two deaf who decided to learn SignWriting. They are used to work with Elena, so they have the same research topics. And they decide to learn SignWriting, but by themselves, without a SignWriting teacher, or they just take the manual of SignWriting and learn it. And it was really strange because one of them doesn't speak a single word of English. And so he studied on the manual without knowing English, and he learned SignWriting, good SignWriting. And this is really the moment where these two deaf that were Barbara, and the sign is this, and Paolo, the sign is this. And when they decide to learn SignWriting, this is the beginning of SignWriting in Italy. The SignWriting working group got bigger, and in 2007, there were 3 hearing person, and I was one of them, and 6 deaf person working with SignWriting in Italy. And because everyone knew sign language was the only language using during the working hours. So we use it during the meetings as well as during the coffee breaks. And it is very strange here in Europe, because usually in sign language labs, the language is a vocal language and not a sign language. In 2009, Elena started a project on e-learning that was called VISEL, V-I-S-E-L. and in which Maria was involved as a computer scientist expert. And this was really the first step of our SWORD project. Do I speak too fast for the interpreter? Because it's one of my big problems. So please tell me.
No, it's perfect. I think it's okay. The interpreter says it's okay.
Okay. So, next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Yes.
But this is only text, so if someone don't see it, it's okay. But what is the SWORD project? SWORD means SignWriting Oriented Resources for the Devs. And it's a collaboration between experts of computer science and linguists to develop a series of digital systems for SignWriting. It will allow SignWriting to become more accessible to deaf users, but to researchers in sign language too. And the philosophy of the project is based on Elena's idea of deaf-centered research. That means that we need to do research with the deaf and not on the deaf. And this is the thing that Elena used to tell me, because I was one of her PhD students, and she always tell me you have to do research with the devs. So next slide, please.
Next slide.
During this symposium, no, this one, okay. During this symposium, you will see us 3 times, speaking about 3 parts of our project on SignWriting. So now I'll show you the linguistic research frame. Then Maria will show you one of our software that is Swift, and here too we use the SW in the beginning of the word. That is a digital, and Swift is a digital editor for SignWriting, and the sign is this. So you have the S and the W in Italian Sign Language, but then you do like this. And this is the Swift sign, like this. Yes. And then we have the OGR, that it's handwriting recognition and digitalization software. Can you go to the next slide, please, Valerie? Okay. So now I'll begin with the main topic of our presentation. And you jump to the other one, that is the 8th. The next one. Oh.
I'm waiting for it. Yeah.
Okay. In our analysis, we decided to have 2 different approaches. So the first one, we call it in vitro analysis. So we consider SignWriting in its fundamental structure, regardless of its actual use. The second one was an in vivo analysis. So we consider the way by which deaf and hearing individuals use SignWriting. For this purpose, we have observed for 5 years Elena's collaborator. And we also had a look at the sign language, at the SignWriting list. Okay, so we look at the collaborator of Elena, who was the first group working with SignWriting here in Italy. Next slide, please. Okay. I used to say alors, like in French. So you all know the SignWriting list better than the issues highlighted in the Rome's lab, because in the Rome's lab we are quite close. And so let's speak about the sign language list, the SignWriting list. If you observe the mail, very often people ask things like, I don't know how can I write this down, or I don't understand the way this glyph can be used, or is there a difference between this glyph and this other glyph? And these questions are quite always the same. Like 1 or 3 times in a year, there is the same question that comes again. And every time you, Valerie, answer saying, oh, I remember, years ago I tell it. Okay. And so we observed the same in our lab. Every now and then someone comes and say, but I don't understand this. And we say, but this one we tried to answer last time or 2 years ago or something like this. So our main question is, why there are recurrent problems with SignWriting, even if SignWriting is quite easy to use. So our question is there a way to solve them once for all? Like this, you can stop, answer again and again and again the same question. Next slide, please, Valerie. The first thing to say is that in our experience, SignWriting learners don't have an official SignWriting teacher. In our experience in Rome, they learn by themselves, alone or in group, using the SignWriting manual for the theory of SignWriting and the SignPaddle to practice. The second thing is that the amount of glyph used in SignWriting has increased over time, and this have left some traces in the ISO organization. I know that in 2010 you have done a new ISWA, but my thesis was in 2000 and I made my analysis in 2008. So there are things that I know that you have already corrected. I say something that is not actual, but I think that there are tracks that we can follow even if you change the ISWA, I hope. The third thing, I think, is that neither the manual nor SignPaddle give explicit rules. So let me clarify, because I know that this is strange. Rules are explained in the manual and they are used in the SignPaddle. But there are rules that are very, very similar one to the other, and they are not put in relation into the manual. So new users that decide to use SignWriting, they don't see that they are exactly the same rules. So they don't need to learn 2 rules. It's just 1 rule. But in the manual, they are explained in 2 different parts of the manual. Okay. So let's see some examples. And now there is a slide that you need to see, but before I will explain what you have to see. And then I tell Valerie to show it to everyone. If I'm using SignPaddle and I'm searching for an arm rotation on the vertical plane and another in the horizontal plane, I have to reach them in the SignPaddle. I have to follow 2 very different paths. And if you look at the slide, you will see the path. So you can show the path, and I shut up for...
Oh, okay.
Everyone have seen it, or?
Shall I go back to it? Here. Okay.
Okay, so we see the interpreter again. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So you have to follow 2 different paths, because you see, you have seen in the slide that for the same, for 2 movements that are quite the same, but are on different planes, on SignPaddle, you have to follow, for once, the horizontal curve movement, and for the other, the vertical curve movement. But they are quite the same. So the rules that works with one works with the other two. And so if I'm using sand paddle, I may not see the relationship between these two glyphs. They are similar, but they are similar and follow almost the same rules. But they are too far away in the tree of choice. Next slide, please. Another example is if I download the zip file with all the ISWA, and I start to look at it because I've done it for my PhD thesis, and I see here too that the glyphs are divided in plants. So I cannot easily see that my arm rotation exists in 3 different plants because they are far away in the classification. And I don't see that they share similar rules. So I just need to understand how it works in one plant to use it in the other plants. Moreover, in the same base symbol, we can find the hand and the wrist movement, but not always. So if you look at the slide, I will explain you before and then you look. There is a tab with the straight movement parallel to the floor, and you see that in the same base symbol you have sometimes the hand movement, and other times you have the wrist movement, and other time you have the arm movement of rotation, etc. So when you look at the classification, sometimes it's like I can't understand it because it's very confusing. So you can look at the slide. Valerie, can you put the slide, please?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So let's back to the interpreter.
Yes, exactly.
The manual is more user-friendly because it's a manual. It's normal. But also show remandments of the ISWA organization. And in our experience with our deaf colleagues, it should be easier to understand the movement of the hand and then of the wrist and then of the arm, and then to understand the it's easier to understand the movement of the hand, the wrist, the arm, etc., than to understand all the straight movements, all the circular movements, regardless to the part of the body that is involved. Next slide, please, Valerie. So we try to organize ISWA by looking. If we try to organize ISWA by looking both at the plan and at the body part, we can obtain a good view of what SignWriting can really code. And it's an enormous amount of things, and it is fantastic. And if you look at the slide for 2 minutes, you will see that there are white cells and orange cells. The white cells are what SignWriting in 2008 can actually code. And the orange cells is what is missing and that we decide to add. So please look at the slide. It's okay? Okay. So if you look at the white cells in our chart, when doing our schematization, we found that in ISWA 2008 there are a lot of holes. Like, therefore, you could write 1 or 2 boings. I don't know how to explain it. Does the interpreter see me?
Oh, does the interpreter see you? Yes.
Yes, you see me. Okay.
I can see you.
He will do it for me, if possible. We can do in sign language. You can do it once in sign writing. Sorry, we can do it once, or you can do it twice. Okay, and you can do it 3 times. But with the classification, with the sign writing in 2008, you can do these 3 movements only in the sagittal plants. So in the plant that is cutting yourself in the middle of the face. I don't know how to explain it. And for the others plant, like the vertical one or the horizontal plant, only the 2 boinks are have a glyph. Okay. So for years, our deaf colleagues told us that it was impossible to write down in sign language the Italian sign for shelf. That is like this. Like this. Okay? Because they say, okay, I can do it 2 times, but not 3 times, and I need to do it 3 times. And with the sign paddle, I can't write down this. Okay? So we decided to fill the holes, adding the glyphs that you have seen in the orange cells. I know that they are not very well drawn, but our purpose is to show you that SignWriting can code it. It allows us to draw them, even they are not present in the official SignWriting. So there isn't in the sign paddle because there isn't in the official SignWriting, but SignWriting can do them. Okay, and this is very, very important for us, that SignWriting is more than the official SignWriting can represent. Next slide, please. So, what we have done concretely, we decide to take the ISWA and to deconstruct its organization and then to organize it again. And to do this, we follow some easy principles. There are 5 easy principles. Okay. The first one is that all rules allowing to transform a base symbol into a glyph have to be explicit. The second rule is that all rules have to be coherent. So we don't want a rule to work with a base symbol, but not with another base symbol belonging to the same category that the previous one. So we don't want exceptions. The third rule is that if something can be done on a plan, it can be done in other plans too. So we don't have this fact that I have the possibility to do it 2 times but not 3 times. If I can do it 3 times in a plan, I can do it 3 times in every plan. Another rule is that if there are 2 ways to write down exactly the same glyph, we keep both, but we explicitly show that they are synonyms. Because as you know, in SignWriting there are historical changes. And so there was a moment when you can write the circular movement with a circle that was with little dots. And then we have the 2 circular lines. And for a moment there are both. And then one disappears. But we say, okay, if maybe someone prefers the old one, it can stay if someone prefers it. Because our deaf colleague speak about the, I don't know if it's a good translation, the taste of SignWriting. They say that sometimes they prefer the graphic of the old one because it is more tasty for us, for them. And in general, even if now you think, okay, they have changed everything in SignWriting, no. Because our purpose is that if Valerie and the team have created a glyph, we'll try as hard as possible to keep it in our classification. So it's not a classification that will eliminate glyphs. It's just rearranging it and adding some glyphs that we think we need it because there are some holes in the classification. You can see in the slide that is there the example of hand movements, where you see that we have organized it in 2 families, and every family has sub-families. But and the rules are here, they are not very explicit because it's just a word that says what is the rule. But you can see that for every subfamily, the rules are always the same. So I let you see the classification, the slides. It's okay?
Yes.
Okay. Next slide, please. So using our reclassification has, for us, many advantages. The first one, and this is the reason why we decide to do it, is that 100% of the rules behind base symbols transformation are explicit. The second one is that if someone wants to add a new hand shape or a new movement trajectory or something else, they can add it without changing all the ISWA numbers, because we have already changed the ISWA numbers. And least but not last, and this is for me as a linguist is very, very important, is that with our new ISWA, we can investigate information on every single glyph. So you can ask now to our database, find me every clockwise hand movement in the vertical plane, and no matter what is the part of the body, okay? Or I can ask, find me every clockwise movement of the arm, but not the other one. And this with very finezza. I don't have accuracy. I have Fabrizio that helped me with English because my English is horrible. And this is really useful for linguists like me who want to investigate the relationship between different components of the science. Because I can want to know if a certain plan of the movement can come with a certain hand configuration, okay? And I say, okay, I don't mind what is really the movement, but just the plan of the movement, and I can do it with our reclassification. So next slide, please. Now, if I were you, I would like to ask, but why do you put new glyphs in the classification? Because SignWriting has already 38,000 glyphs, so it wasn't enough for you. And when I decide to add the glyphs, I ask myself this question, and I say, okay, at the beginning, when I started learning SignWriting, I say, wow, create 38,000 glyphs is impossible, it's too much. And then when I learned SignWriting, I say, oh no, it's not a problem. So for me, it's not a problem. But as my dev colleagues used to handwrite SignWriting, they never have problem to write down a sign, because if they need to invent a glyph, they do it. But once, I was trying to digitalize a text, and I realized that a lot of the glyphs used by my dev colleague do not have a perfect match on the sign maker. So I decided to call those glyphs ad hoc, in Latin, glyphs. So glyphs that are done just for this purpose, to fill a gap. And to analyze them, because I think that it's very important for SignWriting that deaf people can change things to adapt to their sign language. So I discovered that those new glyphs were very well integrated with SignWriting, because they followed those rules that are not explicit, but they are present, and that all deaf people using SignWriting learn just because they use SignWriting. So when I decided to reorganize SignWriting, I thought that it was not a problem to add new glyphs to avoid some exceptions, but only if I could follow these implicit rules that my colleague followed to create new glyphs. Next slide, please. Okay, this one. So let me explicit the rules that my colleague used to create an ad hoc glyph. It is worth noting that they do not invent them with thinking to the rules, but they just do it. And then it was my analysis that underlined that those ad hoc glyphs exist. So what has to be an ad hoc glyph? What a glyph has to have? The ad hoc glyphs appear when there is a gap in the ISWA, or when my colleague don't manage to find the appropriate glyph. But maybe it exists, but they don't find it. The ad hoc glyphs are always consistent with SignWriting rules, which means they must be created by changing the nature of or the shape of an existing glyph, by merging two existing glyphs, or by creating a total new glyph, but always respecting the rules of SignWriting. And they have a particularity, is that they have to be very easy to read for every SignWriting user, because the readability is what makes SignWriting so good to represent sign language. So if a glyph, a new glyph, obey to all that rules, it can aspire in a moment or another to become an official glyph of SignWriting. Okay. So if you look at the slide for 2 minutes, I will show you one of these ad hoc glyphs that is done by merging two existing glyphs. So see the slide. It's okay?
Yes, it's okay. There we
go. Okay. After next slide, please, Valerie.
Okay, where we have 15 minutes before the next presentation starts. Can you hear me? Yes. So.
After my first analysis on ad hoc glyph, I asked my colleague, "What do you think about adding new glyphs?" And the answer was for me very unexpected, because one of my colleagues say, "No, you don't have to do it, because SignWriting have to be poor." Not poor, pure. It's not puro. It has to be pure. Exactly pure. Exactly what Valerie have done, and you don't have the right to change it. And he say, "I always use only official SignWriting." And then I show him a text, and I say, "This is your text." "Yes, but this glyph is not in SignWriting." And this was really, really upset with me because I showed him this. And the other one told me that it's okay to change to use glyphs that are not official, but they don't want me to add them officially because they thought that you, Valerie, will be upset. And so I hope that I know you enough to know that I can do it, but I hope.
And this is I just have to tell everybody that SignWriting was written by hand, only by hand, when it was first developed, from 1974 until 1984 or 5, when we started the first experience of computer development or software development. So we only had handwriting. And when the time came to try to develop a computer program for it, it was really hard to pin down what symbols were important. So, of course, I understand the dilemma you're talking about. What we put into the computer program called ISWA, which means the International Signwriting Alphabet. It was simply those symbols that we felt were important, but it doesn't mean that there aren't others. So yes, I support you in finding other handwritten symbols. Yes, absolutely.
Maria will show you that in our software there is the possibility to add new glyphs, and this is very important for us.
Well, that is very exciting for us too. It's wonderful.
In conclusion, during the 5 years I worked in Rome, I noticed that SignWriting is very easy and fast to learn for deaf people. However, even they can learn it fast, there are some problems that are recurrent. So I decided to reclassify the whole SignWriting to make the rules more explicit, but without changing the intrinsic nature of SignWriting, because I think that the SignWriting is good like this. So our aim is to make SignWriting easier to learn by, in Italy we say, chewing the work to the users. So every new SignWriting users need to understand the rules. So we just help him by telling the rules explicitly. So in our research we have just, and I put a lot of quote because it was a big word, a big work. We have just revealed a concealed phenomenon. So my two last slides.
Oh, of course.
My last slide, I want to make a generic conclusion on SignWriting. Because even if SignWriting this year is a 40th anniversary, is still a very young system for the history of writing. And and it's a system that needs users to grow and to become something that will be really a system to write sign language, and that would be expanded to all deaf communities. Oh, and that the fact that we need the users is the power of SignWriting. Because it's not a system that is imposed by linguists or educators to the deaf, but it's a system that was born from a hearing person, Valerie, but now grows inside the community. And this is, for me, is really fantastic. And for me, as a linguist, when I do a research on SignWriting, it's more than just observing a writing system, because it's almost the first time in the history of linguistics when we can see the emerging of a new writing system and touching with our hands how the community use it, how they appropriate it, and they adapt it to their own uses. So it's really, for me, SignWriting is really a very important linguistic issue. To close my presentation, and you can go to the next one, please, Valerie. Maria, Fabrizio, and I would like to say thank you to all the people that have helped us with our research. So the graduating students of the Master in Computer Science in Rome University, of the Sapienza University in Rome, because they contribute in the implementing of part of the SWORD project. All the deaf and the hearing staff of Elena's lab, the Sign Language and Deaf Studies lab at the ISTC CNR in Rome, so Elena's lab. And moreover, we wish to dedicate this presentation and the other two to the loving memory of Elena, because for our work, she is a very important person. And we also want to thank all the PhD director, colleagues, etc., that helped us in this now it's 7 years that we work with SignWriting. So, and thank you to everyone to have heard this presentation, and I finish.